Amina and Farida had always been inseparable. Their friendship was the kind people envied, so close that they were often mistaken for sisters. They did everything together, walking to school, sharing meals, whispering secrets under the moonlight. But as they grew older, their feelings for each other deepened into something they couldn't explain. It started with stolen glances, hands brushing a little too long, the warmth of a lingering embrace. When they were alone, the world felt different, softer, safer, more real. But in the society they lived in, their love was an unspoken sin, something they could never admit. Farida Amina whispered one evening, as they lay on a mat beneath the stars, "What if we could stay together forever?" Farida turned to her, her dark eyes reflecting the flickering lantern light. "How?" Amina hesitated before speaking, as if voicing the thought would make it impossible to take back. "We marry the same man." Farida sat up, stunned. "Are you mad? Think about it." Amina sat up too, gripping her hands. "No one would ever question why we spend so much time together. We could be in the same house, live our lives the way we want without anyone suspecting." Farida's heart pounded. The idea was dangerous, but the thought of being separated was unbearable. "You really think we can pull it off?" Amina nodded, determination in her eyes. Farida exhaled shakily. Deep down, she knew this was madness. But she also knew that the only thing worse than this plan was a life without Amina. So, with a trembling nod, she agreed. And in that moment, they sealed their fate. Finding a man who would agree to marry them both wasn't easy, but luck or fate brought Idris into their lives. Idris was wealthy, well-respected, and, most importantly, eager for a family. He was growing tired of the endless parade of women his mother introduced him to. He wanted something different. When he heard of two best friends willing to marry him together, he saw it as a sign. To women who already love each other as sisters, his mother had said, "No rivalry, no jealousy. This is a blessing." Idris smiled, believing her. If only he knew how wrong she was. Their courtship was brief. Amina and Farida played their roles, perfectly laughing at his jokes, acting shy when necessary, and pretending to be excited about the wedding. Idris was pleased, convinced he had won the marital jackpot. The wedding day was grand. Family and friends gathered, the ceremony filled with music and dancing. Idris stood proudly between his two brides, his hands on their waists, believing he was the luckiest man alive. But beneath their veils, Amina and Farida shared a glance. Their silent vow was not to Idris, but to each other. "We did it," Amina whispered, when no one was listening. Farida squeezed her hand. "Now, we just have to make sure he never finds out." They both smiled for the cameras, two brides standing beside their groom. A perfect picture. A perfect lie. Their first night as a married trio was filled with tension. Idris, eager and excited, led them to the beautifully decorated bedroom. Candles flickered, the scent of jasmine thick in the air. He had waited for this moment, the night he would finally claim his wives. But as he approached, he noticed something strange. Amina and Farida were holding hands, their fingers intertwined. It was subtle, but it was there. "Are you both nervous?" he asked, smiling. Amina quickly pulled her hand away. "It's just overwhelming." Farida nodded. "Yes, everything happened so fast. We just need time." Idris chuckled, thinking they were just shy. "Of course, I don't want to rush you." He kissed their foreheads. But as he turned away, he saw it again. The way their eyes locked. A silent conversation passing between them. Something felt off. That night, Amina and Farida lay beside him, stiff as statues. Idris drifted into a light sleep. But something woke him in the middle of the night, a whisper, soft giggles. He opened his eyes slightly, just enough to see them. Amina and Farida were holding each other in the darkness, their foreheads touching, lost in their own world. And in that moment, for the first time, Idris felt like an outsider in his own marriage. When Idris was away for business, their world came alive. The house became a playground for their secret love. They danced in the kitchen, whispered sweet nothings in hidden corners, and fell asleep wrapped around each other. But even in their moments of happiness, fear lurked in the background. "What if he finds out?" Farida asked one evening as they lay on the floor, their fingers lazily tracing patterns on each other's skin. Amina sighed. "Then we lie. We lie until the end." Farida swallowed hard. "And if he doesn't believe us?" Amina's eyes darkened. "Then we make him believe." They had gotten away with so much already. What was one more lie? But they didn't know that love, when hidden, grows restless. It starts leaving traces. And Idris was beginning to notice. At first, Idris ignored the feeling. He had seen how close they were before the marriage, but now it was different. It wasn't just sisterly love, it was something more. He started watching them. The way Amina's face softened when Farida entered the room. The way Farida always reached for Amina before him. The way they seemed to have a language he wasn't part of. One night, he decided to test them at dinner. He placed his hand on Amina's thigh. Watching Farida's reaction, she stiffened. Then, subtly, almost unnoticeably, she clenched her fists. His heart pounded. Something was wrong. The pieces started to fall into place. The nervousness, the avoidance, the way they always chose each other over him. And once the thought entered his mind, it wouldn't leave. His wives, his perfect, obedient wives, were hiding something. And Idris was going to find out what it was, keeping the suspense and emotion high. "Let me know how you'd like to proceed." Amina never thought she would feel anything for Idris. She had always seen him as a necessary part of their plan, a man they had to endure, not love. But as time passed, she saw another side of him. Idris was patient, kind in ways she hadn't expected. When she was sick, he stayed by her bedside. When she was tired, he massaged her feet without complaint. He wasn't cruel or controlling. He wanted to be loved, and for the first time, Amina felt a strange guilt gnawing at her. One evening, Farida had traveled to visit her sick mother. Amina was alone with Idris, and for the first time, she wasn't repulsed by the idea. They sat on the balcony, sipping tea, watching the city lights flicker like distant fireflies. Idris turned to her, his voice soft. "Do you regret marrying me?" She should have said no immediately, but something in his voice made her pause. "Don't know," she admitted. Idris exhaled, his gaze thoughtful. "I feel like you're here, but not really here." Amina looked away. She didn't know how to answer. "You can talk to me," he continued. "Whatever it is, I just want you to be happy." For the first time, Amina saw the loneliness in his eyes. He wasn't just their husband. He was a man who wanted love. And before she could stop herself, she reached out and took his hand. Idris looked at her, surprised. And then, in the quiet of the night, he leaned in and kissed her. Amina didn't pull away. And just like that, everything changed. When Farida returned home the next day, she knew something was wrong. Amina was distant, lost in thought. Idris, on the other hand, was glowing with satisfaction, his eyes lingering on Amina in a way that made Farida's stomach churn. She waited until they were alone before she asked, "What happened while I was gone?" Amina hesitated. "Nothing." Farida's heart pounded. Amina, don't lie to me. Amina closed her eyes. I think I might have feelings for Idris. Farida's breath caught. You what? It wasn't supposed to happen, Amina said quickly. I didn't plan it. You kissed him. Farida's voice cracked. Amina looked away, guilt written all over her face. Farida staggered back as if she had been punched. So it was never about us. It was, Amina insisted. It is. But I am confused, Farida. Farida shook her head, tears burning her eyes. You betrayed me. Farida, please. But Farida was already walking away. And for the first time since they started this, Amina felt like she was losing her. Amina didn't know how to fix things. She had spent years loving Farida, but now everything was falling apart. One night, she wrote a letter, pouring out every thought, every feeling she couldn't say out loud. Farida, I don't know who I am anymore. I love you, I always have. But Idris, he makes me feel something too, and I hate myself for it. Please, don't hate me. I can't lose you. She hid the letter under her pillow, intending to give it to Farida in the morning. But fate had other plans. Idris found it first. Idris read the letter once, then twice. A bitter smile curled on his lips. So it was true. His wives were never really his. Amina loved Farida. She had always loved her, and Idris, he had been nothing but a pawn in their twisted love story. Anger boiled inside him. He wanted to confront them, to scream at them, but a new thought crept into his mind. Revenge. He wouldn't expose them. Not yet. Instead, he would make them suffer. Idris started his plan slowly. He began showering Amina with attention, pulling her closer, whispering sweet words that made Farida's heart twist with jealousy. He brought her gifts, touched her affectionately in front of Farida, and watched as the cracks in their relationship deepened. Farida tried to fight it, but it was working. She was losing Amina, and Idris was winning. Farida couldn't take it anymore. One night, she cornered Amina in their room. Do you love him? Amina hesitated, and that hesitation was all the answer Farida needed. You do, she whispered, voice trembling. Farida, it's not like that. Then what is it like? Amina had no answer, and just like that, their love, the love they had risked everything for, began to crumble. It happened on a stormy night. The house was quiet, but the air was thick with tension. Farida had had enough. She couldn't watch Amina slip away any longer. She confronted Idris. You knew, didn't you? You knew about us, and you used it against me. Idris smiled, dark and triumphant. You betrayed me first. Something inside Farida snapped. A struggle broke out, a scream, a shove, and then she grabbed Idris's neck, and Idris fell to the floor dead. Amina ran into the room, her heart pounding. Idris lay on the floor, but he never did. Farida stood frozen. Amina's scream shattered the silence. The police arrived. The trial was quick. Farida was sentenced to life in prison. Amina was left alone, haunted by what they had done. One night, she visited Farida in prison. I'm sorry, Amina whispered. Farida looked at her, eyes empty. So am I. They reached for each other, but the glass between them was unbreakable. Just like their fate. Years later, Farida sat alone in her cell. A letter arrived. The sender, Amina. She opened it with shaking hands. Farida, I lied. That night, it wasn't an accident. I chose you over him, and I would do it all over again. The letter slipped from her fingers, and for the first time in years, Farida let out a broken, trembling laugh, because love, even in its most twisted form, never truly dies.